Peter Jackson announced that they were making the movies of J.R. Tolkien's great novel, The Lord of the Rings, I was among the thousands, probably millions, of Lord of the Rings readers who were deeply skeptical, having seen some of the earlier attempts to turn Tolkien into cartoons. When I went to see the first movie, I was absolutely amazed at how successfully Jackson had found a way to visualize Tolkien's novel, and particularly not so much the opening scene, which is all battle stuff, but when they got to the Shire, to the land of the hobbits, it seemed to me that Tolkien would have been very pleased to see what Peter Jackson had accomplished. So only somebody who was unusually churlish or obsessive could fail to be grateful, it seems to me, to Peter Jackson's accomplishment. That said, the transformation of Tolkien's vision in the movie is persistent, systematic, and striking. To put this at its most general, I would say that Jackson has, despite his good intentions, transformed Tolkien's transcendent and sacramental dimension into the regular constraints of mere action heroes. So that, in many ways, the figures of Aragorn or of Frodo become much more like the characters we might have expected, say, in an American Western of the 1930s through the 1950s than they are in Tolkien's own conception in the novel. I'd like to start out by looking at that aspect of the transformation of the novel into the movies. The way that, in a certain sense, there's something in Tolkien, something that's open to a kind of sacred or sacramental dimension of human life that is more or less excised from the movie, or that at least is flattened out. I'll start with the chapter in the book, it's also the title of the subsection of the movie, called The Mirror of Galadriel. Those of you familiar with the story will remember that after the Fellowship of the Ring passes through the mountain, through the Mines of Moria, with the disaster of losing their leader, the wizard Gandalf, they arrive at an enchanted wood, Lothlorien, that's protected by a high elven couple. The queen is Galadriel, played by Cate Blanchett, with such memorable force in the movie. Let me start by just reminding you of the way that Tolkien tells this particular piece of the story. Frodo, who's carrying the Ring of Power, and his trusty sidekick Sam, as he turns out to be in the movie, he's much more clearly in the book distinguished both by being much younger than Frodo and by being of a distinctly lower class, social class, than Frodo. This is something the movie completely erases, partly by choosing such a young actor, Elijah Wood, to play Frodo. Frodo and Sam are at the point where they realize they'll need to be leaving Lothlorien and continuing with their dangerous and indeed desperate journey. And the scene with the Mirror of Galadriel shows us their experience, the Hobbits' experience of magic, and particularly of elven magic. So what I'd like to do first is to show the clip from the movie to see how Peter Jackson realizes this particular episode, and then to go through a little bit what happens in the novel in this scene. After I use the Mirror of Galadriel to illustrate this general flattening of, or removal of something sacramental, something transcendent from Tolkien in the movie, I then want to turn to the love story of Arwen and Aragorn in the movie.
Will you look into the mirror?
What will I see?
Even the wisest cannot tell, for the mirror shows many things. Things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass. I know what it is you saw, for it is also in my mind. It is what will come to pass if you should fail. The Fellowship is breaking. It has already begun. He will try to take the ring. You know of whom I speak. One by one, it will destroy them all.
If you ask it of me, I will give you the One Ring.
You offer it to me freely. I do not deny that my heart has greatly desired this. In place of a Dark Lord, you would have a queen! Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the morn! Treacherous as the sea! Stronger than the foundations of the earth! All shall love me and despair! I pass the test. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel.
I cannot do this alone.
You are a ring-bearer, Frodo. To bear a ring of power is to be alone.
This is Nennu, the Ring of Adamant, and I am its keeper.
This task was appointed to you, and if you do not find a way, no one will.
Then I know what I must do. It's just... I'm afraid to do it.
Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
Now, that's a great piece of movie making, but it's also a culturally extremely influential interpretation of Tolkien's novel, because more people will remember that scene than will remember the chapter. What's so striking about the transformations in this scene? Well, there are so many of them. Let me go through a few. Despite the fact that this is a place where the movie stays very close to Tolkien's book, it utterly transforms the feel of the scene. It's a wonderful illustration of how important reading in detail is, finding the specific texture of a particular text. Here is how this scene begins in Tolkien. One evening, Frodo and Sam were walking together in the cool twilight. Just think of that sentence. First of all, one evening. In the movie, it's in the dark of night, and people are sound asleep. The difference between setting this scene more or less at midnight and setting this scene in the evening is tremendous. Evening is, within Tolkien's book, and particularly within this scene, evening is exactly that time at which the stars become visible. There are no stars anywhere in Peter Jackson's way of showing this scene. But the stars for Tolkien are the reference point beyond Earth, beyond merely earthly things. The evening star particularly occurs over and over again throughout the novel, perhaps most memorably when Sam sees it peek out of the clouds at a dark moment once they're in the land of death, the land of Mordor. So this entire reference to the moment when the stars come out is lost in the movie, is transformed instead into the dark night of the soul, and particularly of the lone adventurer. So that instead of Frodo and Sam having this experience, it isolates Frodo as the rugged individualist, the self-sufficient hero. And the emphasis at the end of Peter Jackson's scene, to be a ring bearer is to be alone. If you don't do it, nobody will do it. Those particular words are actually spoken at the end of the Council of Elrond in the book, by Elrond to Frodo, at least a version of those words. But the context there is that Frodo doesn't have to worry about doing it alone because he's going to have friends to depend on. That's the point, in some ways, of the way that Tolkien tells this bit of the story as well. It's Frodo with Sam. It's something Frodo couldn't do as a lone individual. So to tart up Frodo as a kind of American Western hero, a Mad Max kind of guy, you have to isolate him more, because that makes him more powerful as a hero and makes the dark night of his soul more typical of an action hero in a movie. But it makes him much less like the way Tolkien understands him. Notice one other thing. This first sentence here. One evening, Frodo and Sam came walking together in the cool twilight. That is, Frodo and Sam go walking in the cool of the evening. Now, this particular image, and indeed the particular phrase, in the cool of the evening, is culturally very loaded because, as I'm sure all of you saw recently, it appears in the 8th verse of the 3rd chapter of Genesis. It's what God is doing. God is walking in the cool of the evening when He comes across Adam and Eve, and they know they're naked. Now, clearly, the elven forest, the enchanted forest of Lothlorien, is projected to us as a kind of Eden. An Eden that Sam and Frodo are on the verge of needing to depart from. To depart from, for one reason, because Frodo has this evil ring of power. And in the end of the scene, we find out he also has a special kind of knowledge that only a ring bearer has. So that the resonances with the Genesis story are also lost in Peter Jackson's reformulation of the telling. I've mentioned the importance of the evening star in the way that Tolkien tells the story. The way that this happens, particularly striking way, is when Sam, who's the first one to look into the Mirror of Galadriel in the book, decides that he'll take a peek in because he wants to see the magic of the elves. This is on the 2nd page, if you've got the version in the handout I gave you. Sam says, this is maybe a quarter down the page, he says, "I'll have a peep, lady, if you're willing." And he says, this is an aside to Frodo, "and I'd not mind a glimpse of what's going on at home. It seems a terrible long time that I've been away. But there, as like as not, I'll only see the stars or something that I won't understand." Now, Sam, when he thinks of the fact that he's got this pool of water he's going to look into, he thinks of what's reflected in the sky. I'll only see the stars. What is Galadriel's response to this? She says, "Like as not," said the lady with a gentle laugh. She laughs. Can you imagine Cate Blanchett laughing in that scene? Peter Jackson's Galadriel in this scene is very much darker than Tolkien's Galadriel. To make her serious and to make her sad, Peter Jackson had to prevent her from laughing. Why does she laugh at Sam? She laughs at Sam because Sam doesn't realize that if he looked into this bowl of water and saw the reflection of a star, he would see one of the most sacred things there is in the entire world. Sam's a wonderful guy, but he doesn't fully appreciate the sacredness of the tale that he's inside of. So that's part of the movement of Galadriel's laughing. Now, what Sam sees is a vision of, among other things, the Shire. This vision of Sam's, this vision that shows Sam as somehow contained within earthly concerns, even though he has a love for concerns that go beyond the mere earth. This earthiness of Sam is transferred in the movie to Frodo. An extraordinary move when you think about it that way. So, Sam's earthiness is displaced into Frodo, but it wouldn't look heroic enough because all that Sam sees is trees being cut down and a new sawmill built. He sees the uglification of the Shire, the industrialization of it. What Frodo sees in the movie is making this heroic and evil. He sees the enslavement of the Shire. So once again, the movie is forced to tart up into heroism, something that in the novel is much more restrained, but at the same time very moving. This sense of a loss of a natural environment that Sam the gardener can fully appreciate, even if he can't appreciate what a star is. After Sam has had his peep into the mirror, the Lady Galadriel asks Frodo if he now wants to look. And Frodo says, this is on the 3rd page if you've got the handout version, he says, "Do you advise me to look?" And it's very important that Galadriel says, "No, I don't counsel you one way or the other. I am not a counselor." This has been emphasized earlier on in the same chapter. The point is that the mirror gives us a kind of knowledge, but not the kind of knowledge that lets us just control our path in life. Peter Jackson instead makes Galadriel directly into a counselor. She says, by telepathy, he's going to try to take the ring. He's talking about Boromir. You know he's going to try to take it. Look out. Be careful. So he strips away this whole sense that there's something about the quest that can't be brought under human control. What Sam sees doesn't, or what Frodo sees rather, has nothing to do with the Shire, with what Sam saw. What Frodo sees are some disconnected scenes of the long narrative history of the Ring and of the fall of Numenor. So that what Frodo sees is not the here and now, the earthly. What he sees is the incredible historical extent of the story in which he's just one little present part. So this whole aspect of Frodo understanding himself within this much wider, more transcendent frame of reference is lost in the movie in order to isolate him as a kind of hero. Finally, when Frodo offers Galadriel the ring, he does this in the book too. In the movie, Cate Blanchett goes into some Frankenstein-like walk toward the ring. Here's what happens in the book. Frodo says, "You are wise and fearless and fair, Lady Galadriel. I will give you the One Ring if you ask for it. It is too great a matter for me." Galadriel laughed with a sudden clear laugh. It's the second time in the scene that she's laughed. And she laughs again because one of the hobbits doesn't fully appreciate what he's just said. She laughs. She's not overcome with a desire. She's been tested by that desire, but she's not now facing it. And so, at the very end again, this is near the top of the last page, she laughs again after this transforming vision where you see her power and greatness. She laughs again. Indeed, the only figure who's emphasized as alone is Galadriel at the moment when she's thinking through what the temptation would be, that she would be the only person in a spotlight. So aloneness, in the way that Tolkien tells the story, is a feature of a temptation to a certain kind of prideful power. It is not a central part of the way the heroes understand themselves. So, this scene, despite how close it stays in its way to the movie, represents an extraordinary transformation of the themes of the book in order to make the movie more of a hero story, or at least a story that coheres more with our typical views of what an action hero would be. Now, what I want to play for you now are a couple of scenes where the movie departs farthest from the letter of the book, but yet it seems to me retrieves some of that transcendent and sacramental spirit of Tolkien. So, in the place where it's farthest from the book, namely in the introduction of the romance story of Arwen, the Elf Maiden, and Aragorn, it seems to me Peter Jackson, and particularly the two women, Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyton, who are the co-writers, they have returned to an aspect that's really there in Tolkien, even though it's not exactly there in the form of this story. So, the first little clip I want to show you is about 1.5 minutes from the first movie, where we're first introduced to the romance between Arwen Evenstar and Aragorn.
You said you'd bind yourself to me, forsaking the immortal life of your people.
And to that I hold. I would rather share one lifetime with you than face all the ages of this world alone. I choose a mortal life.
You cannot give me this.
It is mine to give to whom I will. Like my heart.
That's the introduction to the romance between Arwen, the elf, who of course is immortal, and Aragorn, a long-lived man, but a man nonetheless who will die. And she's here pledged to give up her immortality in order to live with him. Her father, Elrond, one of the most important elves still left on the earth, naturally enough, is not real keen on this idea because he fears not only the loss of his daughter, but more especially, he fears the sadness of his daughter when Aragorn eventually will die. And that's the scene that I want to play for you now from the second movie.
Arwen, Tolenilu. Ichaer Gwannar Navalano Sibado no Kirar.
I have made my choice.
He is not coming back. Why do you linger here when there is no hope?
There is still hope.
If Aragorn survives this war, you will still be parted. If Sauron is defeated and Aragorn made king and all that you hope for comes true, you will still have to taste the bitterness of mortality. Whether by the sword or the slow decay of time, Aragorn will die. And there will be no comfort for you, no comfort to ease the pain of his passing. He will come to death, an image of the splendor of the kings of men in glory, undimmed before the breaking of the world. But you, my daughter, you will linger on in darkness and in doubt, as nightfall in winter that comes without a star. Here you will dwell, bound to your grief under the fading trees, until all the world is changed and the long years of your life are utterly spent. Arwen. There is nothing for you here, only death. Ai Muerin Vilithlim.
So in that scene, Arwen's love for her father, an immortal elf, in the end trumps her love for Aragorn, a mortal man. And she begins her trip to the havens where she can take a ship that will take her away from mortality so that she can live an eternal life. So the question then is, of the tension introduced into the movie, is whether Arwen has any reason to stay with a mortal love when she has a chance for this personal immortality. What the writers introduced into the movie is the notion that Arwen's ultimate choice to stay with Aragorn and to face that hideous scene where she mourns for his death, what makes that possible for her is not giving up immortality. It's giving up her own individual mortality by seeing the possibility of the life of a child. This is a scene then from the third movie.
Take her by the safest road. A ship lies anchored in the Grey Havens. It waits to carry her across the sea. The last journey of Arwen Undomir. There is nothing for you here. Only death.
Lady Arwen, we cannot delay. My lady!
Tell me what you have seen.
Arwen.
You have the gift of foresight. What did you see?
I looked into your future and I saw death.
There is also life. You saw there was a child. You saw my son.
That future is almost gone.
But it is not lost.
Nothing is certain.
Some things are certain. If I leave him now, I will regret it forever. It is time.
So what the writers, I think in an inspired decision, did was to show that within a purely human perspective, a perspective that now Arwen is going to choose out of love for Aragorn, there is still an openness to a kind of transcendent or sacred dimension, a dimension that for the elves is understood as individual, personal immortality, but that now for Arwen, as for Aragorn, is understood as something their love makes possible. and in particular that their sexual love will make possible. The fact that their romance for them opens up into welcoming a new life. So the movie, while it's flattened at the level of heroism, seems to me to reattain Tolkien's own vertical dimension when it moves into the realm of love. On Sunday at 2 o'clock, we'll have the movie Mind the Gap. See you then.